to all of you, and it's a pleasure with you today. As Walid said, it's really a privilege for us to welcome all of you in this Innovation Summit. You know, at Schneider Electric, we have been committed to Turkey for the past 40 years, and we are committed in good and bad times. And what is very, very important for us, and I like the panel before, we are convinced that sustainability is happening now, that the need to decarbonizing the planet is happening now. I'm going to share with you what is our vision, what we think about the future, and what can be done tomorrow morning. But more important, we don't believe one company will make the difference. We believe it's a full ecosystem that will take us to the next stage, and it's an ecosystem which is made of government, industry association, customers, university, and all together I think we have a chance really to transform and move faster. And of course, Schneider Electric has been committed for the past 15 years at least, really to be the leader of that ecosystem. So you know probably Schneider Electric historically as a company in energy management who was developing product, equipment to distribute, to manage energy. And 15 years ago, more or less, in our company, we have said that's not enough. We cannot just be where the energy is distributed. We need to find a way on how we manage energy, how we control energy, how we consume energy. And of course, this vision came, which looks probably like a simple vision when we speak about today, from the fact that we were consuming energy, we were generating CO2 emission everywhere in the world, and at one point of time, it will not be sustainable. 2015, Paris Agreement has been an important trigger. Nothing happened. And we keep fighting at Schneider Electric. We kept fighting because we are absolutely convinced that the world would have to be more sustainable. And now, hopefully, in the past 5 years, we have started to see an acceleration. As it has been said before, it does not move at the speed where we would like it to move, but it's happening. And before I start anything, I want really to tell you, you know, I've been involved in this company for 30 years. You discuss about trend, and you say it will be for the future, or it's not for me, it's not for my country, it's not for my business, whatever. And one morning you wake up and you say, it's already there. And it's already there. Now the question is, are we ready to go a bit faster? So what I'm going to try to share with you is really what is our vision, but more important, what is our long-term vision, but what we should do now to make this vision happening. Now, very interesting, we are at an inflection point, which was not that obvious 3 years ago. We are at an inflection point because that has been said since yesterday, and especially in that part of the world, we have been faced with energy crisis, which has created a lot of volatility in the market, and we have seen more and more this trend for sustainability becoming a reality. I would say probably 2019 is a time where the world has started to take more interest in sustainability. But of course, you know that in the past 3 years, a lot happened everywhere in the world on the energy front. And we have been faced with many crises in different parts of the world. It has been translated in lack of access to energy in some part, but of course, huge increase of cost. And you see that in every cycle that we have been through, this basically crisis is getting bigger and bigger. Now we are back to a different level, but you can expect that it will come back at one point of time. The second point, of course, which has happened in the past years, is this increasing focus for decarbonization. And I'm going to come back later on in my presentation, but we are at a stage where basically if we don't act, really the world will go nowhere. And you know, I used to say, and I've been living in different parts of the world, in China, in India, and more recently in Middle East. But my family, you know, is still in France. And when I go back to France during the summer, I have my mom who's telling me, you know, oh, this summer the weather has been really exceptionally hot. And I keep hearing my mother since 10 years telling me it's exceptionally hot. No, it's not exceptional. It's a new normal. Those natural disasters, we were 10 days in the US. I don't know if you heard about it. A big storm on the east part of the United States. And I could give many events everywhere in the world, many examples. So what we are seeing is a reality. This increase of the temperature everywhere in the world is creating natural disaster everywhere in the world. That's the new norm. Now, as you know, there are big plans, and I'll talk a little bit more later. Progress is being made, but we are late. Actually, interestingly, just this morning I was reading the report of the Climate Week, which happened in New York 10 days ago. We can already conclude that based on the 2023 numbers, actually, when we say we should save 10-15 gigaton per year to be back to 1.5. This 10-15 is probably moving to 20 now. So probably it's even worse than what we used to say 1 year ago. So it's very important that we are all being conscious that we don't have too much time in front of us. Now the positive news, because I'm a very, very optimistic person, in the past 2 years we have seen really a convergence, and the catalyst has been probably on one side the COVID and on the other side the energy crisis. And I remember 2 years ago a lot of people, in particular in Europe, debating, okay, we have to face the energy crisis, the short term is important, let's take a pause on sustainability. We see everywhere in the world that there is a convergence of the short term and long term, because at the end of the day, it's about energy, it's about how we consume energy today and how we are building infrastructure for the world of tomorrow that should be also less CO2 intense. So the very, very good news, I think it has been very well understood by government, by organizations everywhere in the world, that those challenges are aligning now and we need to act very, very fast. On one side, to achieve those goals for energy security, but of course to achieve our climate neutrality for the long term. So now let's start a little bit to do a deep dive on what does it mean? What does it mean to achieve those goals? And we have to start by a very, very important point, which is to understand on how we are using energy. And I like to show those very simple slides as a reminder. We speak a lot about greenhouse gas emission everywhere in the world. That's something sometimes you will hear, 57 gigaton, but go a bit more deeper, and when you speak about CO2 emission, this is basically 74% of the total. Now it's important that if you re-baseline this number and you look only at those CO2 emission, so 42 gigaton of CO2 emission everywhere in the world, 81% come from energy. Now you understand why a company like Schneider Electric, 15 years ago, who is a global leader in energy management, in power and control, has spent so much time on this topic, because we believe we are at the center of that energy and climate transition. So when you look at those 36, 37 gigaton of CO2, where they come from? They come on one side from the source of energy. And of course, we talked a lot about gas, about oil, about coal, and what can be done on that part of the equation. But we also believe, and it has been said by my colleague Wally this morning and yesterday by my other colleagues, it's very, very important that we always look at the two parts. Where the CO2 emission comes from an energy standpoint, but how it is being used and what are the sectors which are using energy. And why it's very, very important to speak about sector, and I don't have the time to do it today, unfortunately, is you can be very, very high level to develop technology solution, but it has to be very, very specific by sector. In home, in building, in data center, the solution is very, very different. Nevertheless, when you look at it, that gives you the magnitude on where we consume energy in the world. And actually, I was checking last week the situation in Turkey. Interestingly, the percentage you see on the right-hand side are fairly similar in Turkey. You don't see a lot of difference, maybe 2 or 3 points of difference, but basically it's transport, industrial, building, and inside building, residential, home, the place where we all live together, is representing half of what we have in building. So when you look at that situation, it's very, very important that we understand what can be done to address those two parts of the equation. So we have created at Schneider Electric what we call Electricity 4.0. It's our long-term vision on what needs to be done to be back to 1.5, but more important is how you translate this vision on what can be done tomorrow morning to act on it. So what we have done, and I think it was very important to share with you, and during the 2 days you will hear a lot about that, we have created our own research institutes a bit more than 5 years ago at Schneider Electric, because we were using a lot of external scenarios, but we wanted to build a scenario which is much more practical, which is entering in the detail on the way we consume energy. And we came to the conclusion that there is a path to be back to 1.5, 2 degrees, something like that, but that will require to have a very, very different view on the way we want to tackle energy. The first part, which has been part of the public debate probably for the past 5 years, is to replace energy supply. And of course, to bring more renewable energy everywhere. And I'm sure in your life, you can hear a lot about it. Turkey has committed, a large part of the Middle East has committed. But interestingly, when we, executive of Schneider, doing global job, we were traveling in the past 3-4 years, and especially, when you go to such event like the COP or Davos or whatever, 90% of the debate, public debate in particular, was on renewable. So we have been a very strong advocate to say, yes, it's important. It's part, and if you look at my previous slide, it's very important to decarbonize the energy supply. But when we went back to our scenario, we said if we just rely on renewable, we will never make it happen. So we have to look at the other part of the coin, which is the way we consume energy. This is why it's very, very important to understand how we consume energy in home, in building, in data center, because this is 55% probably, let's say 50% of the solution to make it happen. The most important part is when you go a bit deeper on the demand side, what can be done? One, it's about electrification. It's electrification of transport, it's electrification of home, it's electrification in buildings, it's electrification in industry. And of course, you all know the most obvious example, which is electrification of transport. We see more and more EV in the world. But it's also important to understand that the only way to reduce your energy consumption, to reduce your CO2 emission in home will be also to bring electrical technology and, for instance, by using heat pump in your home. Last but not the least, and we'll talk a lot about it in this forum, it's also how you electrify processes. Because in industry, a large part of CO2 emission are related to the consumption of fossil fuels, gas, to feed all your industrial processes. And there are technology today which are available to electrify those processes. So the first part of the equation on the demand side is to electrify. The second part, which is probably the most obvious and the easiest one to achieve, but still not the most developed everywhere in the world, is to reduce energy consumption by implementing technology that help you to save energy, that help you really to reduce the intensity of the energy consumption. And here it's very, very important that you have always two dimensions. You have the existing infrastructure and you have the future infrastructure. So we do encourage, of course, all design institute, all engineering company in the world to think about from day one when they design, for instance, a building like this one, you know, designing this building, you should incorporate already sustainability concept. Because this building is going to live over the next 20 years, probably it's important that the way you will use it today will be different from tomorrow. So today the good news, you have technology that help you to design and simulate, to do a digital twin before you develop the building, to understand by simulating different technology and different usage of that building, how the building will react at the next stage when you will start to use it. So that's very, very important. The second part, of course, which is very important on existing building, is to make sure you implement systematically technology that help you to measure, to control the way you are managing energy. And the last part, which is probably the most recent one, but we start to see more and more companies understanding that circularity is very, very important. You cannot design anymore a product for a short life. You have to think about a product that will be designed to be extended over time, to be retrofitted, and eventually being recycled. And we believe that circularity is probably the last chapter, which will be very, very important. So when we look at our scenario, the first good news is there is a path to be back to net zero. There is a path if you go very much in the details on the supply and the demand and trying to understand what can be done. So we at Schneider Electric, in our vision of this Electricity 4.0 world, we are absolutely convinced that we are at a turning point for a very simple reason. One, because electricity is definitely part of the solution. It will help because electricity is the greenest source of energy. But the second part, which is as important as the first one, what you can do today on the digital side is very, very different than what we were able to do 10 years ago. And I'm not even talking about AI. AI is just going to be an amplification on what you can do on the digital side. So the combination of digital and electricity is really making it possible from a technology standpoint. What is very important for us, we tried to imagine 5 years ago, how all of this will work, because it's very theoretical. You talk about supply, renewable, you talk about demand, but what does it mean at the end of the day? It's just word, it's long-time scenario. And we've tried to imagine how the world will look like in the future. The interesting part, we have been with my colleagues talking about that for many years, and we go to Innovation Summit, we speak about it, and the very interesting part, it's a reality today. It was probably a vision 5 years ago, but what I'm showing to you now today is a reality. So Electricity 4.0 is happening already. Let's imagine where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago in some country. We are coming from a world where the consumption of energy was very, very linear. From the place where you generate energy, you distribute, and people on the other side are consuming energy. That's a world in all of us have been grown up, the way we have managed and consumed energy. And we have started to move, and we need to accelerate that transformation to a world where we have access to cleaner energy. So of course on the supply side, you start to see more and more renewable energy. And this renewable energy, of course, start to be part of the equation. But the third part is even more important. We are moving now to the next stage of equation, where you are in a world where not only you have access to renewable energy, but you are moving to a world where prosumer, and what we call prosumer is a combination of producer of energy and consumer of energy, are also creating their own energy, and they are giving back part of their energy that they don't consume basically to the grid. And here it's a very good, interesting point, because this was a vision 5 years ago. It's a reality. The concept of prosumer is being developed in different parts of the world. We see it, for instance, in the US. We see it in the Europe. And it is, of course, amplified by the last point that I was mentioning before, which is the electrification. Because when you add electrification of your processes, that changes everything. Now, let me give you a very simple example, because it can look a little bit sophisticated. What is happening, for instance, today on the West Coast in the US, and I've seen some example actually recently in Europe, it's very simple. If you apply this concept in home, what does it mean? So in your home, you have access to a contract with a utility, which is providing to you cleaner and cleaner energy. That's the first part of the equation. In your home, what you are doing, you have replaced your traditional car by an electrical vehicle, so you are electrifying some of your point, and you need to recharge, of course, your car at home. The third point which is happening, you start to put solar panel because you want to produce your own energy. The fourth point, which is very important, there is part of what you produce that you don't use, so you want to store energy. So you are in a situation where all of a sudden, from a consumer, you become a prosumer. You produce energy, you produce clean energy, you have access also to the grid, you have electrified your process, and you are basically a control center. Your home is becoming a control center. And why it's very important, like company like Schneider, with all of you in our industry, we are participating. It means that your electrical panel that you have in your home, and many of you, I'm sure you don't know even where is your electrical panel because you don't use it. All of a sudden, your electrical panel, which has been in your home for 10, 15, 20 years, is becoming the most important part of your home because it's becoming the control center where you are going to manage all this equation. And it's quite complicated to manage because you need to give signal at any point of time during the day. When do you need to charge your car? How much energy you can generate from the solar? When do you need to store? How you can send back part of your energy to the utility. So this concept that I'm just explaining to you, which is basically our Electricity 4.0 vision, is happening in home already in the US. It starts to happen also in Europe. And of course, what is happening in home is happening also more and more in commercial building. That's a complete transformation of our industry. That's what you can also call the new energy landscape. But when you apply this example at scale, that changed completely the way we consume energy in the next 15 years. And when I said before that there is a path to be back to 1.5 degree, this is a path. And this is very, very important that we have all in mind that it's not anymore a 10 years, 20 years dream, it's happening now. It's happening now, and it's very, very important that we accelerate. And of course, I said it before, why digital is becoming more and more important? Because once you have built all this infrastructure, we don't want to give to our consumer an apps where they will be the one to make the decision. We want to amplify all of that with algorithm, with artificial intelligence, making sure that you learn. You can learn how you consume, you can leverage how the others are doing, and of course your apps becoming more and more intelligent will be the one that will decide automatically how to manage all of that. And it's possible with the technology of today, which was not the case probably just 5 years ago. So why we are so obsessed, Schneider Electric to be a thought leader and again to communicate on this topic, because we believe that there is a very, very high level of urgency, which I explained at the beginning. But the point number 2 is even more important. We believe that the time to act is now, because the technology are already available. And of course, we are working at Schneider for the past 15 years to develop new technology, and you will discover a lot of it today again in this Innovation Summit. But the technology are already available to make it happen. And it's very interesting when you step back a little bit on everything that I've said to you before it's very interesting that we have all benefited from technology for the past 100 years. And you know, we benefited from different industrial revolution, the industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, same on the electricity. But the interesting part, the progress that have been created thanks to all this technology have created the situation of today, which is a famous 32 gigaton of CO2 that we are all emitting everywhere in the world. Now, the next part of the equation is much more exciting. We believe Electricity 4.0 can deliver this acceleration. But just to tell you the magnitude of the change, it took us more than 100 years to generate those 42 CO2 of emission, and it has to be done now in the next 20 years. It has to be done very, very fast. So what I want you to retain at that point of time of the presentation is we see this acceleration everywhere. We see this acceleration everywhere, and everyone has understood in the world that digital is the absolute solution to make it happen. And the good news is you see an acceleration, and it's just a proxy of all those devices which are connected, because everything that I've explained before, you can do it only if you have devices which are connected, where you can extract the data. And combined with the fact that electricity consumption is going to increase, we believe, again, there is a path to make it happen. Now, let's move to the other part of the equation. Do we believe people are taking it seriously? Government are taking it seriously? Yes or no? Enterprise. Again, I continue to be a very optimistic person, and I'll tell you why. When you are looking at the number today, and it's very interesting for me in my position, because in 2019, I was leading strategy and sustainability for the company at Schneider Electric, and I was looking at all those trends, and I was wondering, is it going to happen one day or not? Now, very interestingly, you take the same number 5 years ago, everything has changed. Number one, 100 countries in the world have made their pledge. And the pledge, the sum of the pledge made by all governments in the world is equivalent, or let's say, represent 80% plus of the global greenhouse gas emission in the world. So, which means that governments are on board. We can always complain, we can always ask for more, but as of today, governments are on board, and in every single COP every year, we see the progress. The second part, which is even more important for me, because I believe even more from the private sector, from company to make it happen, you see since 2018 the number of companies who have committed to be net zero in the world. And we know very well that topic at Schneider Electric, because actually we were one of the first 10 companies, part of the first batch of 10 companies in the world to be committed to be net zero and to have our target approved by SBTi. And we have been following this trend since. So as of today, end of August, you have already 6,000 companies in the world who have committed to be net zero. Now you can tell me it's just a commitment. I think our colleague from HBR was saying before, is it greenwashing or whatever? But let's make no mistake. We, Schneider Electric, we are a publicly listed company. Once we make our commitment, we disclose our commitment, we report our CO2 emission every quarter to the financial market, and I can tell you better that you show that you're going to deliver. Of course, those commitment has to be approved by SBTi, but that's very, very important, because once you're committed, the train has left the station and you need to deliver. And what is very, very important, and I would like you to keep that in mind, especially when you are in Turkey, is that the world has changed tremendously in the past 5 years. If I would have shown those numbers 5 years ago, it was a European story. That's it. Now it's a worldwide story. You see the representation of companies who have committed, you can find them everywhere in the world. Of course, you still have 50% in Europe, because this is where the sustainability story has started. But I was recently with a customer from Singapore. The stock market in Singapore has publicized a new rule where they are asking all the listed companies to declare on scope 1, 2, and 3 now, for instance. So we see that happening everywhere in the world. The second part that I want you to retain is even more important. In this slide 5 years ago, 100% of the company were large multinational, company like Schneider. As of today, you have 38%, 40% which are small and mid-sized company. And why I'm saying it's very, very important to understand the impact on your business in Turkey. When you are a company like Schneider Electric, you start your journey 10 years ago, I said it, you have 10% of your scope 1 and 2 emission, which are coming from scope 1 and 2 emissions, so direct and indirect. We're at 0 today. Very quickly, you realize that 90% of your scope of your emission are related to scope 3. And then you start to go more in details. This is related to your business, but it's also related to your supplier. And you start to go and talk to your supplier. We have engaged Schneider Electric 3 years ago. We have launched a program to engage our 1,000 largest suppliers in the world to be part of our journey, because if they reduce their CO2 emission, that will have a positive impact in Schneider. What I'm telling you all of that, once you are starting that process and you see those 6,000 companies committing, everyone has to follow. And wherever you are in the world, even if the world is a bit fragmented those days from a geopolitical standpoint, I can tell you we are very, very well connected. And I was looking, I was just here during the weekend to visit Istanbul, and it's very interesting because I was thinking, I was 10 days ago, with the CEO of Accor, because we are supporting Schneider Electric Accor globally to help them to go through their decarbonization journey. They have made commitment, and we are helping them to measure their CO2 emission, to track digitally, and so on and so forth. And I was just looking at the hotel at the Novotel Hotel. This Novotel Hotel that you have in Istanbul, they have to decarbonize, because they are part of a larger group and they have no choice. They have to be part of that journey. At the same time, when you supply equipment to other companies in the world, and we know Turkey is a big manufacturer of machines, of course, your customer will ask you. So we are all very connected. You cannot escape. And that's, yesterday I was meeting with some customer here. We are thinking, Turkey, we are not yet too much impacted by sustainability. I said, be careful. You have no choice. You cannot not escape that trend. If you want to become a player for the business of tomorrow, if you want to remain in business, you have to embark in that journey. And that's very, very important. And embarking in that journey is very complicated. And again, you can look at the negative part of this journey. You can look at the positive side. I'll tell you what the best companies are doing in the world, but the reality now, after 4 or 5 years of change, is we see companies struggling. So what we want really to share here is to encourage all companies in the world to take that topic very seriously. It's not because, and back to the point of greenwashing, it's not because you just commit and you say to the world, I'm going to be net zero, that is going to happen tomorrow morning. It's a very, very complicated journey. And now we see the first batch of companies who have committed in the past 3 years, because I do believe, again, everything has started to change in the year 2019, 2020. We see that those companies, most of them, they are struggling to achieve their goals. And why? Because they don't take the topic seriously, in short. They believe it's just a short term. You are going to launch an action plan for the next 3 years. You are done and it's finished. And that does not work like that. And I can tell you, we, Schneider Electric, and I've been doing that actually in my previous job for Schneider Electric, it's a permanent cycle you have to go through. Decarbonizing a company is something that you have to do for the next 50 years. Like you have a business strategy, a people strategy, a supply chain strategy, you need to have a sustainability strategy, and it has to be fully embedded in your company strategy. We were very proud, Schneider Electric, to say that we have been elected by Time Magazine as the most sustainable company in the world. But I can tell you it's not by chance. It's because sustainability is at the core of our strategy and everything we do. So what I like to share with you in 1 minute is a very interesting story for us, because we were developing all those technologies that I've explained before to help our customers. We are doing the same for ourselves, but at one point of time, 5 years ago, we realized that's not enough. We need to help our customer to strategize, to look at the way they are managing sustainability. So it's interesting, and some people don't know yet, but we have created our own sustainability consulting company in Schneider Electric. And we have the chance today to work with more or less 50% of the Fortune 500 companies. And every 2 years, we do a survey to try to understand more in detail what's happening. So interestingly, another surprise, when I say that only 9% have achieved their goals, they're facing a lot of challenges. And those challenges are lack of stakeholder engagement, lack of financing, lack of understanding of technology, of CO2, lack of carbon knowledge in the company, lack of alignment, lack of data and reporting. So we've tried to deep dive a little bit more, and we've tried to understand what is the cycle for a company to go through a decarbonization journey. And as I was saying, it's not a one-shot. You are going through several cycles. And actually, when I apply what I'm going to share with you, I realize that exactly the same happened to Schneider Electric. So when you look at those companies that we have engaged with, they are going through a cycle. What is the most common? First of all, In 50% of the case, people work on their scope and 1 and 2 emission. They start to have access to renewable. So that's great. That's a starting point of the journey. That's a good place to start, but that's not probably enough. But starting the journey is definitely understanding your CO2 emission and starting to act on your scope 1 and 2. The second part of the journey is usually when you want really to reduce, you want to save energy, you want to change the way you are managing energy, and you start to engage with your supplier, which is exactly what we have done at Schneider, because you realize their scope 3 emissions are very important. And the last part, which is very important, and that has been probably the biggest trend in the past 12 months, companies understand that they have to electrify their processes. And no surprise, if you come back to what I said before, what is our back to 2050 scenarios, the way we see the world evolving from an energy consumption, again, it confirms the business case that you have to work both on the supply, you have to work both on the demand, and scope 1, 2, and 3 are part of that journey. So, based on this work and what we wanted to share with you as a takeaway of my long presentation, is to say that some companies in the world have shown that it's possible to make it happen. And interestingly, they are all following the same methodology, the same process. And I can tell you, at Schneider, that's exactly what we have done for our own company in the past 10 years. You have to make sure that you have a very, very clear strategy when it comes to decarbonize. And we try at Schneider to help our customers, to help them to understand their energy consumption, to build a roadmap, to engage their stakeholders, to communicate. The second point that we've learned even more in the past 3 years, probably which was not that obvious 5 years ago, data is everything. Because we all believe at the beginning it was important to decarbonize your supply, it was important to save energy, but we very, very quickly understood that without having access to the data, nothing can happen. So we started to put a lot of solutions to help our customer to monitor the different usage of energy, to see how you can save, how you can report, how you can accelerate. And the last part of the journey is really to make sure that you have a very clear roadmap. And this roadmap is usually a 2 years, 3 years roadmap, because as I said, companies are starting by their scope 1 and 2, and they are moving to scope 3, they are moving to electrification. And the reason why we are putting that movement is because it's an ongoing journey. So what we have done at Schneider Electric and what we want basically to share with you since yesterday is to tell you that there is a very, very high level sense of urgency to make it happen. 2, it's already happening in many, many parts of the world. 3, we are all interconnected. So Turkey is not living in a parallel universe and is connected to Middle East and the rest of the world. And 3, and last point, which is very, very important, technology are available. And we have all our teams just behind who are here for you today to show you in every stage of that journey what you can do in home, in building, in data center, in industry and infrastructure to make it happen. So we at Schneider Electric are very committed not only to be here to do business and sell, but as you understand, we are very committed to be a thought leader, to make the world change, and to convince all our stakeholders that there is an urgency and the moment is now. So I hope if my presentation has one goal, is to convince you that there is an urgency and it's possible to make it happen sooner than later. Thank you very much for your time and thank you for your attention.